Good afternoon. Let's get right down to business. We are doing it live right here, doing more at 4 weekday afternoons. We get right down to business with the news-driven hour right after Ben Shapiro and just before the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang at 5. Mottek On Money live on the air, 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com. And your on-demand Mottek On Money podcast, kbc.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. We have a winner. Stocks ending sharply higher today to kick off the new week, coming off the worst week of the year. Equities bouncing back from the worst week for the S&P 500 and for the Dow since March of 2023. The Dow coming in for a closing gain today of nearly 500 points. The S&P 500 up about 63, and the Nasdaq gained nearly 200 points. Apple taking the spotlight today. The stock barely budged at the close, up 9 cents to $2.20 and change. Apple, with its big announcement today, unveiling its long-awaited AI-boosted iPhone 16, promising improvements in its personal assistant, Siri. Oh, I think I might have just activated Siri's all over the place by saying that. Rolling out new software starting in test mode next month. Apple and tech companies around the world, of course, in case you haven't noticed, rushing to add artificial intelligence to products. Apple, of course, calling their AI product Apple Intelligence. Phones are expected to be among the most important battlegrounds. California-based Apple also betting the AI feature will drive consumers to upgrade their phones amid a slowdown in iPhone sales. Apple Intelligence, the company's AI software being used to improve Siri, there it is again, as well as enhancing features such as understanding and identifying objects captured by the phone's camera. Shares of Apple moving slightly higher today in what proved out to be an all-around great day for the stock market. Looks like Apple, by the way, is just about $16 or so short of its 52-week high, which was $237 and change. The company saw that back on July 15th. We had the big jobs report. The big enchilada of monthly economic reports came out on Friday. We saw the markets react to that. This week, we'll be getting a new reading on inflation. That's the other big enchilada that the Fed pays attention to, the jobs report, as well as the inflation numbers. We'll be getting a new reading on inflation on Wednesday, the Consumer Price Index for the month of August. The expectation is it'll show the headline rate of inflation continuing to fall to 2.6% from 2.9%. Of course, both of those numbers still higher than the Fed's target of 2%. The yield on the 10-year note, by the way, has suddenly hit the lowest we've seen so far this year, down to 3.70%. That's the one that impacts the fixed-rate mortgage rates out there. Oil back in focus. Oil moving higher today, coming off a 15-month low from last week. This on news of Tropical Storm Francine is strengthening, a potential to strengthen into a hurricane that could significantly disrupt oil operations in the Gulf of Mexico sometime later this week. In the retail space, we see discount retailer Big Lots filing for bankruptcy protection, becoming the latest retailer to become insolvent, partly as a result of higher interest rates. Big Lots, according to the latest report here, has agreed to sell itself to an affiliate of the investment firm Nexus Capital Management. And unless another bidder comes out and outbids Nexus, the transaction is expected to close in the fourth quarter of this year. We'll shift gears later this hour with Lauren Fix, our go-to car expert, as consumers and car makers rethink the rush to electric vehicles. California lawmakers, meanwhile, have passed a bill that would require new cars to warn drivers who are speeding in hopes of reducing freeway deaths. The bill would require all cars made or sold in California to be equipped with speed warning technology called Intelligent Speed Assistance. Also this hour, we'll get the real on what's happening on the streets of Los Angeles and what's happening with crime with Dion Joseph, a decades-long law enforcement veteran who has worked with the homeless in downtown Los Angeles. He's a public speaker, author, community policing expert, and homeless advocate. Dion Joseph will be joining me live later this hour. But first, on your money, the markets, the economy, the whole works, AI, Apple, you name it. Money manager Ken Winans is with me now, CEO and Chief Investment Officer at Winans Investments, which you can find at winansinvestments.com. Ken Winans, author of numerous books, including Investment Atlas 1 and 2, soon to be Investment Atlas 3, also Forbes magazine contributor, longtime contributor to this program. Ken Winans, by the way, now has his own weekly show here on 790 KBC. That show is Winning with Winans, which you can hear usually at 6 p.m. on Monday. Tonight we have a football game on, but normally, yes, 6 p.m. Monday is the time for Winning with Winans. Ken Winans, thank you very much for coming to the KNX 1070, the 790 KBC microphone here. Whoops. Mottek On Money is on 790 KBC. You know what? We've been talking for so long, Ken. I had a flashback to the days when we were having our previous conversation. So Thank you so much for joining us.
Frank, I'm in shock. You never, ever make a mistake. And you didn't even have any wine this afternoon, so you have nothing to blame for any of these things. But hey, listen, I'm hoping that the new Apple phone actually works, because all I know is that Siri has never, ever understood my voice. So I've ended up not ever using it. But no, it just doesn't. And I've just never had the thing work well. But I think that what is good to understand is that there's certainly going to be a lot of new products coming out from tech going into the holiday season. And you are 100% right. I literally just, as I moved to Las Vegas and I changed out my phones, they were literally giving away old Apple phones at a very fair price, just because they're trying to get ready for everybody to buy the 16.
All right. So what about Apple stock here? Barely moving today. And, of course, you're the market historian. You've tracked Apple's performance on the days like this, moving up 9 cents to $2.20 and change. What about Apple stock here?
Well, I think it's like everything else. If the phone actually ends up getting traction, and then, it is a product company. Look, Apple's one of the biggest stocks in the S&P 500. It really it's kind of funny. Everybody who owns it already, whether it's in a fund, an ETF, or individually. So in order to attract more buyers of it, you're going to have something new. And not to rub it in, but let's face it, the goggles didn't work very well. I mean, it didn't work out. But the other thing that's important to bring up, Frank, is that we had a nice rally today, obviously, but the S&P 500 also went through one of its regular rebalancings. There were stocks added, there were stocks taken away, so you might want to add that to maybe some of the news today was tied to what happened there, not necessarily just pure market movement. But let's all face it, we were relieved that it was an up day and not a down day, because it was an ugly Friday, as we all remember, and a lot of times there's continuation with it. It didn't seem to play out that way.
Right. It was an ugly week for NVIDIA last week. Today, rebounding up about $3.60 or so, $3.64 here at the close at 106.47. What about the Magnificent One, NVIDIA?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, it is a magnificent one, but there's obviously antitrust regulation or investigations going on right now, so it might end up being the magnificent one split in half, 2 or 3. Unfortunately, we're having a lot of those kinds of investigations going on right now on whether or not these companies are too big. Google's one of them. NVIDIA is another one. There's other investigations in other areas as well. That does dampen enthusiasm for a price of a stock if they think they're headlong into a legal battle with a government agency. So we'll have to see how it plays out. But, right now it's the same thing. NVIDIA is going to be coming out with new chips, new advances in technology. The company is firing well, but it's also trading at a pretty high multiple, so you got to let it play through.
All right, oil back in focus with this storm threatening Gulf of Mexico oil operations. It's been remarkable to see the drop in the price of oil lately, below $70 a barrel, despite the intense drama playing out in the Middle East, with Israel still under threat from Iran, and the Hamas-Israel war continuing following the attack on Israel last October 7th. Hard to believe that the one-year anniversary of that attack is coming up. What about oil here?
Well, a lot of people are getting this wrong. It's not so much the oil derricks being turned off, is that the majority of the oil refining capabilities for the United States are found in that hurricane belt. So whether it's Texas, Louisiana, and as far as California is concerned, many people might not know this, but those environmental fuel blends that we have to have mandated by the state, and we're glad we have it because we have cleaner air because of it, but that oil and that refined fuel comes from that area. So that could be, unfortunately, a nasty bump in the price of oil in California, or price of gas in California, if that happens.
We're on the air live with Ken Winans, CEO and Chief Investment Officer at Winans Investments at winansinvestments.com. And Ken, let me ask you about the volatility we saw last week, and we did come off the worst week of the year, basically, and volatility spiked again. Are we in for more volatility here, given all the wild cards on the table?
In a couple of ways. First off, September, we go way back, Frank, but I'll tell you, you and I usually don't have fond memories of September. It always seems to be one of those wacky times of the year, that the markets get whacked. What I would say is this. It's traditionally a very volatile time. We have a lot of news out there, being an election year with obviously the debate tomorrow night. That could have a bearing on how things play out. The Fed, more important than that, is the Federal Reserve having their announcement on earnings or on the interest rates. And I'm going to be looking at the language very closely from the Fed. And what I mean by that is interest rates are only part of the story with the Federal Reserve. They've got that massive trillions of dollar balance sheet. They're trying desperately to shrink it, to normalize it, to use Fed terms. And it will be interesting to see what they're going to be talking about with that. So there's just a lot of news over the next 2 weeks that could make it further volatile.
Right. A lot riding on the debate tomorrow. There's no debate that tax issues are going to be critical, and big dramatic difference between the two sides on taxes, with the Democrats proposing a, tax on unrealized gains, right? Which would suck the wealth right out of the United States, right?
Well, it's going to make people begin to shift things around. And I will tell you that I've had a lot of talks with people, regardless of their political views, on changes in tax policy next year. I think it's a very serious matter. If we have taxes go up next year while the Federal Reserve is still trying to fix the policies that happened, because let's back up here real quick. The Feds saved the markets in 2020 with COVID. If it wasn't for them jumping in and doing what they did, we might be in a very different picture today. But the Fed's not going to save anything here. If we have taxes go up next year, and especially if the taxes are squarely aimed at investors, it could get pretty ugly. So it's something we have to pay attention to. But let's also talk about this, and I think it's important for California residents, is California typically has a policy. They mirror whatever comes up at the federal level. So it could be a double whammy for the state residents.
All right. And then, of course, if the Trump tax cuts don't continue, if those are reversed, it would be the biggest tax increase we've ever seen.
Yes, it would be. And the problem that I see is that we actually took away a lot of deductions. That was part of the deal that was made in 2016. So now we're going to have rising taxes with fewer deductions. That's just not a good world for an investor.
All right. You also cover the cryptos, and we speak to the biggest fans of crypto here, as well as the harshest critics. I remember you told us you did acquire your crypto credentials recently. You've made a big study on crypto. So what's your view of what's happening? Very volatile time for Bitcoin, well off its record high this year and bouncing around.
Well, it is bouncing around, and it's doing it in a pretty volatile way. So is Ethereum. Ethereum has actually really gotten slaughtered even worse than Bitcoin. What's going on is this. And by the way, you can track cryptos very similar to the way you track any other kind of currency or commodity. The tools work just the same. Crypto is in a downtrend right now, meaning that there's more sellers than buyers. I believe personally what's happening, there's a lot more talk about what's going on with stablecoins. People are focused on that. That's what they seem to want right now. And then the other big part is the regulatory situation. There is just a lot more concern about crypto coming out of the various government agencies, and a lot of it at the state level. So I think as long as you have those headwinds, it's hard to have a bull market take off on that. But I've been telling people, look, if you're committed to crypto, you need to be prepared for the good and the bad times, and nothing goes straight up. It just in anything.
On the air live with money manager Ken Winans, and we got the inflation report coming out this weekend. That's the other big important number that the Fed will be watching on Wednesday, the Consumer Price Index. We got the jobs report came out on Friday. This report coming out on Wednesday. What do you think is going to happen on Wednesday on inflation, and what do you think the Fed's next move will be?
Well, here's the thing, and I think it's important for people to clarify when we talk about inflation gauges and what the real cost of living is. And what I mean by that is I actually think CPI might actually come down a bit, because I've been looking at various, agricultural commodities, certainly with what happened with oil. They've all been coming down for the last couple of months. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that happen. But Frank, let me just give you an example of what I mean by that. I went out and had lunch earlier today, and on the bottom of my bill was saying there was a 4.5% serve tax or serve fee on my bill to pay for state and local mandates. That's an increase in the cost of living. That's not inflationary, according to the government. But the Fed's not stupid. They know this kind of stuff goes on, so they know that we're going to have this inherent stickiness when it comes to the cost of living issues. At the end of the day, the market is planning on a 50 basis point cut in interest rates by the Federal Reserve. If that does not happen, I think the market won't take the news well.
On the air live with Ken Winans, and that is pretty significant, what you saw there on the bottom of your check, because the private sector trying to figure out a way to make up for these government mandates and slapping that, nearly 5% surcharge on there speaks to that.
It really does. And the part that you find interesting about it is, again, I live in Las Vegas now. I'm yet to see that language on a bill in Vegas. And so you're having competition between the resorts of California and the resorts of places like Las Vegas, and it's making it hard to do business. But hey, Frank, it's the age-old rule of business. Business passes on cost to consumers. So it's just the way it works. And we might be angry and upset about it, but don't paint. I would not take out your anger on the restaurateurs or the companies that have to do this.
Ken, at this point, let me ask you the big question here. We've been asking you for decades. Where are you putting money now and or taking it off the table?
Well, it's interesting. One thing I've learned as a money manager in September, I let my cash build up. I just do. In fact, I talked to my traders today back in the office, and I just said, let's not be afraid to let cash build 15, 20% throughout this month if we have to get out of certain things. But what I do think is important, it's not that I'm going to have cash sitting around forever. I'm getting ready for what I'm going to rotate into. And there's going to be a pivot point throughout the fall. And I think the leadership of the market is going to change. And I honestly think you're going to find the financials are going to take leadership roles. Healthcare stocks are going to take leadership roles. Why do I say that? These are inflation-proof areas that if there are tax increases next year, they won't get hit.
What about cars? We're going to be talking to our car expert, Lauren Fix, later this hour. Tesla's had a wild ride. We see Tesla shares popping again today, back to around $216 and change, rebounding more than $5 today. A lot of shakeout happening, it seems, in the EV world and rethinking of by consumers as well as the automakers on the future of electric vehicles.
Well, now for me, I drive a combustion car. I've been doing it for a long time. I've been saying for quite a while, I'm not against any of the new technologies, but I need to make sure that it works for what I do, and I happen to drive very long distances. So for me, that's a big issue. But it was funny because I had a nephew who had just gotten married, and Jeremiah and Lauren, best of luck to you. But anyway, with that being said, I saw a gentleman who owns one of the largest Ford dealerships in Southern California, and I was asking him how things are going. He said, Ken, what is selling are those new Broncos. And guess what? They're gas-powered. So the car companies are coming up with new cars, but they're not necessarily EVs, and they need to make money.
And speaking of Ford, we see Ford stock has come under pressure this year, trading in the $10 range, up 80 cents today to $10.66. What about Ford here?
Well, here's the thing. Now, what I would buy are Ford preferred stocks. Those are those high dividend paying securities. I think the Ford preferred is paying north of 5%. I would buy that instead. But no, I think to be a car maker right now, especially with the political wins as they are, is just a rough thing. And, you talked about Tesla. Tesla has its own problems too. They're all having to grasp with the same issues. I find it interesting that they're having a revolt in Europe right now by manufacturers saying, hey, we cannot follow the mandates of ESG global standards. And they're fighting back. So even in Europe, it's not just an American thing. It's a global thing. Manufacturers are pushing back.
Ken, great to have you with us here in the studio, and thank you very much for joining us live here this afternoon. That is Money Manager Ken Winans, CEO and Chief Investment Officer at Winans Investments, which you can find, by the way, at winansinvestments.com. Ken Winans, author of numerous books, including Investment Atlas 1 and 2, and we look forward to Investment Atlas 3 coming out soon. We'll check out your latest column in Forbes magazine on the U.S. dollar. And Ken, it's always great to have you with us, and of course, we'll be tuning into Winning with Winans here on 790. KABC.
Thank you, my friend. You take care.
Thanks a million. Ken Winans with us live here on Mottek On Money, 790 KABC. Mottek On Money continues here on 790 KABC. Good afternoon. Hot in Southern California and on Wall Street for a change today, coming off the worst week of the year. The Dow closing up 484 points, settling at 40,830. The S&P 500 up 63 at 5,471. And the Nasdaq gained 194 to settle at 16,885. The yield in the 10-year note is at the low point of the year, down to 3.70%. Some good news in the real estate business. That's the one that impacts the fixed-rate mortgage rates out there, which are set to take a dip this week if this continues. Apple in the spotlight on the iPhone 16 announcement. Apple stock today closing higher by 9 cents at $220.91. Taking a look at NVIDIA. It has rebounded today up nearly $4 at 106 and change. Taking a look at the price of gold, moving higher by about $2 now at $2,534.90 an ounce. Crude oil futures moving higher today, still below $70 a barrel, up 3 cents at $68.74 a barrel. This as we watch Francine. That's a tropical storm brewing in the Gulf of Mexico and set to disrupt oil operations in the Gulf at its present course. Big Lots filing for bankruptcy. Stock closed up 4 cents to 50 cents, down about 39%, and after-hours trading down about 20 cents. Supermicro computer shares of more than $23 at $409 and change. One of the big winners, UAL, United Airlines stock, also in the plus column by 6%. Taking a look at the cryptos now. Let's not forget about the cryptos here. And we see at the moment Bitcoin is hovering up about $100 at $57,211. Ethereum at the moment up about 22 at $2,362. And let's bring up Doge here at 10 cents. And now the latest news for you here in 790 KABC. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KABC. Good afternoon. It's time to shift gears this afternoon. Lauren Fix joins us live now, our go-to car expert. Consumers and car makers rethinking the rush to electric vehicles. California lawmakers also passing a bill that would require new cars to warn drivers who are speeding in hopes of reducing freeway deaths. That bill will require all cars made or sold in California to be equipped with speed warning technology called Intelligent Speed Assistance. Lauren, thanks very much for taking the call here this afternoon.
Yeah, I've been watching this. This is your state Senate Bill 961, and it passed at the House and the Senate level immediately, and it's on Newsom's desk to be signed at the end of this month. I'm really concerned about it because what this intelligent, I would say unintelligent speed limiting is basically a law. It would be a law that that you cannot shut this off, that if you go over the speed limit, your car will beep at you. Now, of course, this means every state's going to follow because 17 states are going to follow immediately what California does, but they're not going to build a car just for California. So that means every state's going to get it. Now, what this means is you cannot shut off this frustration of going 2 miles an hour over the speed limit, 5 miles over the speed limit. They're calling it a safety feature. That's how they're getting by this intelligent speed control. And this is all part of, again, what we've talked about before with the kill switches. And this is all coming down to that same thing. It goes into effect in 2026. This would go into effect almost immediately, but they want it by all 2030 models. To give you an idea, I'm already test driving 2025, and we're already getting first looks at 2026 cars. So that concerns me that we're only a few years away before every new car you buy has a kill switch, which means if it feels that you're distracted, you're speeding, you're under the influence of alcohol, whatever it might think, the computer will make a decision. This is not a person saying, Frank, I think you're stressed today, so I'm not going to let you start your car. It's going to be done by a computer who's going to make a decision based on the start-stop technology through the button that you start your car. This is extremely concerning. We brought it to, when it hit the Federal Registry, we had over 200,000 comments. You and I put it out there as well as many other places, more than they typically get. They usually get only a couple hundred comments. And even Thomas Massey tried to have the funding for it stripped away. But unfortunately, 19 Republicans agreed to it under the guise of drunk driving. Nobody wants drunk driving. Nobody. There's not a person here that's listening or anybody in your state that wants a drunk driver. And there are already 31 devices that can stop that from occurring. But this is put under the guise of that, which is what they always do. They move things over like this speed limit law. This is passed by California. It will alert you if you're going over the speed limit, and it will drive you crazy. But, I mean, the thing is, if you're in an emergency situation trying to escape something, pass someone so you're not in an accident, all of that is going to be beeping at the same time. And there was also one senator who wanted to have it so your lights would flash, so everyone around you would know that you're speeding. It doesn't look like that one's in the law. You can look up the law, which is SB
961.
SB 961. Yes, it's written out there. You could read it. It's not that long. It's in plain English, and it's also going to be on motorcycles. It's going to be on mopeds, and it's going to be on cars and trucks.
Wow. On there live with our car expert, Lauren Fix. And Lauren, let me ask you this. Arnold Schwarzenegger, when he ran for governor, actually made the point saying special interests have a stranglehold in California. He said it with a thicker accent, of course, but that's what he said. Who's pushing for this? Is it the insurance industry? Who's pushing for this?
Well, that's the hard part. I love how they don't tell you that. There's somebody obviously pushing from behind the scenes. Apparently it's obviously a government regulation, but there's no one specifically that you would know that's behind it other than Democratic Senator Scott Wiener has authorized the bill. So he is the person on the forefront. He's your point person. Why he wants this, I don't know. It just doesn't make any sense. And this is very concerning to a lot of people because, 10 miles over the speed limit could happen if traffic is flowing at 65 and you're driving at 55. You're going to get run over by somebody else. It's going to cause accidents because you're slowing down because you don't want the noise to drive you crazy, which is what their goal is. They think slowing down traffic is a good thing. And I've driven on many California highways. You go along with the flow of traffic. Otherwise, you're basically causing an accident.
Right. At one point, I remember my father was telling me you got a ticket for going too slow. If you don't follow the flow, then you flag yourself and end up getting pulled over. At least that's the way it used to be. I don't know if anyone gets pulled over anymore for anything, but that's certainly something to think about. And all right, turning now to we're going to shift gears here now. What about EVs? Looks like some of the automakers are rethinking this rush to electric vehicles. And, of course, we've had this heat wave here in California and a lot of power failures. What about the latest here on what's happening on the EV front?
Well, there's a lot of things going on in the EV front right now. On a global level, we're seeing that the sales in Germany have just tanked. And that's a problem. And part of that is twofold. One, they allowed all these Chinese car makers to bring their vehicles in, which hurt their car market, which is about 60% of people are employed in Germany are auto workers. And so that presents a problem on its own because now you've got your people not working, they can't afford cars, and they're looking at Chinese cars that are coming in and flooding the market, and it's hurting them. And for the first time in history, it looks like Volkswagen's going to shut down two of their plants. One's a battery plant. The other one is for the ID3, which is the car that goes with it, which is slightly smaller than what we have here. But we're noticing that on a global basis, although they're still pushing hard around the world, China is making electric vehicles for other countries. And the number one maker for Russia, which I find very interesting, is China. They own 100% of the Russian car market, and they're not selling electric cars or hybrids. They're selling gasoline-powered cars, which I found very interesting. And here in North America, we've already seen, as you drive by any dealer, doesn't make a difference what brand, you're going to see a lot of that product sitting there waiting to be sold. Manufacturers know this. To give you an idea, Ford loses $44,000 on every electric vehicle they sell. And how do you make up the difference? Well, I'm test driving a Bronco Raptor right now, which is $20,000 more than the previous, which is I own a 22, but $20,000 more, there's no power. There's no more power, there's no additional accessories, there's nothing more other than the price went up. It's the same exact vehicle. So we're seeing a lot of issues where car manufacturers are trying to offset the cost or the losses, in this case, of electric vehicles by offering subscription fees, trying to get you, you want heated seats, which BMW tried and that failed. But we're seeing a lot of subscription fees for safety features and things that are on your car that you can buy. Consumers don't like that. They don't want to have to buy Blue Cruise. They don't want to have to buy OnStar, and you start adding that up and your monthly payment gets out of control. And this is part of what we're seeing, not just in the regular cars, but we're seeing a big draw and a big push to hybrids. You're seeing a lot of the prices not being so flexible on that, so it's important to keep that in mind. If you're thinking about a hybrid, you may have to shop around, maybe even out of state, and bring one in, because the problem is everybody wants a hybrid now because you get the best of both worlds. But keep in mind, if you are going to purchase a hybrid, please lease one. Don't buy one, because after it's outside the warranty, it's extremely expensive to repair two propulsions.
Isn't that something? It's hard to believe. 2024 winding down. You mentioned the 25s and the 26s already coming out. Before you know it, it'll be time for the LA Auto Show. And, of course, we always look forward to seeing you here for that. Lauren Fix, editor-in-chief of Car Coach and the co-host of the Total Car Score podcast. Lauren, thank you very much for taking the call this afternoon.
Anytime. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And right out to the freeways now, to the car show on the freeways. Let's get out there now here in 790 KABC. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KABC. Crime and homelessness impacting business in a big way here in the Los Angeles area. Let's get the real on what's happening out there now with someone who knows it firsthand. Dion Joseph, a decades-long law enforcement veteran who's worked with the homeless in downtown Los Angeles. Big supporter of the Union Rescue Mission in downtown L.A. He's also a public speaker, author, community policing expert, and homeless advocate. Dion Joseph, thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me on today.
Wonderful to have you with us. And give us your view of things out there at the moment, especially what's happening in downtown L.A.
Well, the biggest thing happening in downtown LA area, obviously, biggest concern is the mental health crisis. Unfortunately, we have a lot of individuals who have been thrown away by the system, and a system's solution is to sprinkle pills on them in the name of civil liberties and kick them out into the streets. Unfortunately, we know being mentally ill is not a crime, being paranoid schizophrenic is not a crime, bipolar is not a crime. We all know that as law enforcement agencies, but when those things meet crack cocaine, methamphetamines, and other serious drugs, that's when their conditions become magnified 100-fold, and that's when they become a police problem. So I think people out there really need to understand that. Then we have the fentanyl crisis, which is probably the worst I've ever seen. Like, so many people have been passing away that I've known for over 20 years, and they're just passing away off of something that's about the size of 2 milligrams of salt. That's taking them out left and right. Harm reduction centers in the area, San Francisco, you name it, that are not really helping these individuals. It's almost like they're enabling these individuals. And so these are some of the things that I'm saying. And also crime with the passage of Prop 4757 and AB 109. It's really impossible to keep these individuals safe. And I got to say that the officers that I've been working with for years are doing the best we can with what we have. But until the laws change back to where there's teeth in the laws and we can get some of these individuals into mandatory programs to help them, it's going to be pretty tough out there in places like Skid Row and across America.
On the air with Dion Joseph, and you mentioned the so-called harm reduction centers. These are places, shelters where drug and alcohol use is permitted, and these are the places that are getting the government help, whereas places like the Union Rescue Mission, which does not permit drugs and alcohol to be used on the premises, where you have homeless women, children, and seniors there, they do not get government help. What do you think of that?
Well, I think it's horrific. Everywhere a harm reduction center has been placed, anywhere in the United States of America, disaster has followed. Just look at Philadelphia, San Francisco. And thankfully, these places are finally waking up, but it feels like L.A. County is slow to wake up to this reality. When you're giving people the means to harm themselves, right? It's giving clean needles is one thing, but when you know there's a drug called fentanyl out there that's killing them, and you give them the means to ingest fentanyl, which is laced in almost everything right now. It's in marijuana, it's in crack cocaine, it's in everything. Giving them the means to do that at this critical juncture where people are losing their lives so frequently, I think it's reckless and irresponsible. It's not about harm reduction. They're actually causing harm, in my opinion. That's where we are, and it's just really disturbing to see. But what's also wonderful to see is there are some programs out there who are trying to help people beat addiction, but they're also don't believe in the harm reduction approach. They believe in creating an environment that's more conducive to change so that the influence of the service providers there who are trying to help can be stronger than that of the gang members and drug dealers who are preying on the people. That's what it should be about. But for some centers, it's not like that, unfortunately.
And when people hear about Skid Row in downtown Los Angeles, many people think it's just one street, but it's about 60 blocks, right, of downtown L.A.?
Yeah, it's over 50 blocks, and it's always been that way in the center of downtown L.A. It's adjacent to many other cities in L.A. and South L.A., and the reason why it exists is because in those cities that are adjacent to the Skid Row area, they've already been on the lower end of the socioeconomic ladder, so to speak. So when the drug epidemic hits those communities, these people fall faster and harder than their more affluent counterparts in other parts. And that's why a lot of people gravitate to Skid Row, because it's the only place that has 108 different services to help people with a myriad of issues, which I think is great. The problem is it's in the middle of a drug bazaar, so it's difficult for people to get clean, unlike in Betty Ford, Malibu, or Passages, where there's horses running around, people are doing yoga, and any time a drug dealer shows up on site, a nuclear missile drops and he disappears, because they're actively protecting those individuals. But for the individuals in Skid Row who have to try to get better, the drug dealers not only outside the program, but also inside the program, which makes it really hard for the really good service providers to do their job.
Well, you certainly are an angel in the City of Angels, being a first responder there and being right at the forefront. When you interact with the homeless, especially families out there, tell us about some of the memorable moments you've had recently.
Oh, man. Well, I've had some really, really sad experiences for the most part, but that's just the system we're working in. But I've had some wonderful experiences. There have been individuals I've been able to reach. Thankfully, I work for a great agency. I can't mention them. That has always been proactive and, hey, go out there and find ways to connect. And I've networked with many resources and helped house about 150 people over 10 years. Now, that's nothing, but that was 150 people that was ready for the housing. We had to create the environment where they were ready. I was working with my agency to start programs to empower and educate homeless women about rape and domestic violence so they can know that they're just as important as anybody else in the city. Mentor programs off the cuff called Just Like You, working with children and letting homeless children know that it doesn't matter your circumstances, you can rise above it, and making sure we put mentors in front of these kids whose lives mirrored these kids at one point and show them that they can be successful. So I love working for the agency I work with because they've allowed me to engage in policing in such a way. So those are the memories that I'll take with me forever. No matter how bad things get, those are the things that I'll take with me for the rest of my life when I retire.
You're an inspiration to all of us. And what's your message for business people who are struggling in the face of all these tremendous challenges, especially in the downtown area?
Well, it's not just business people, it's everybody, from the homeless man living in a tent, from the person living in low-income supportive housing, to the business person. Prop 36 is on the ballot, and it's a real chance for us to begin to reverse the damage done from Prop 47. So I really hope that people vote for it, because you can't cry to me about not being able to solve crime if you don't help give me the tools to do it. Also, we got to replace the district attorney. I don't want to say anything disparaging about the man, but enough's enough. It didn't work. We have to get back to balanced leadership at the DA's office that is pro-victim. And another thing I have to say, and it's very important, we have to have people sign up. Law enforcement is a great career. I've been able to do incredible things, in a wonderful agency. Sign up. We need your help. Without all three of those things working together, we can't fix Los Angeles or LA County. But with those things working together, I think we can really get back to where we were before with 13 years of crime reduction. I believe that wholeheartedly.
Thank you very, very much. We salute you for your decades of service to the City of Angels. Dion Joseph, decades-long law enforcement veteran who's worked with the homeless in downtown Los Angeles, also a terrific public speaker, author, community policing expert, homeless advocate. Thank you very much for providing hope and encouragement to all here in the City of Angels. Thank you very much for taking the call this afternoon.
Take care. God bless, brother.
Thank you very much. And right out to the next program here on 790 KBC, and that is the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang. Stay tuned. You're listening to Mottek On Money, 790 KBC.
Welcome to Talkville, the ultimate Smallville rewatch podcast, season 5, episode 4. This is Aqua.
The new episode opens with summer shenanigans at Crater Lake. What could go wrong?
Tom, was the lake super cold?
Yeah, that's a mountain lake when we do these underwater scenes and everything's crystal clear and everyone sees everything crystal clear. If any of you ever go underwater and open your eyes, nothing is crystal clear.
Nothing.
We have that slow motion underwater fight sequence. We can't see anything.
Good Lord.
Binge seasons 1 through 4 of Talkville before season 5 begins, wherever you listen.